Today we're going to be talking about a very sensitive subject. Your lesson question for today's lesson is, how did the Nazis commit the genocide known as the Holocaust? It's our goal for this lesson to learn about the Holocaust. In order to do that, first we want to describe the anti-Semitism that led to the Holocaust. Then we want to identify the types of discrimination that Jews were facing in Nazi Germany. Then finally, we want to describe Hitler's plan to commit genocide. As we move through this lesson, there are some vocabulary words that I want you to listen for. First is your academic word, which is inhumane. Then your domain-specific words, words like anti-Semitism, concentration camp, ghetto, genocide, and Holocaust. Remember that if you ever need extra help through this lesson, you can always use your glossary to help you. Our lesson question for this lesson is, how did the Nazis commit the genocide known as the Holocaust? In this lesson, to answer this question, we're going to take a look at how anti-Semitism related to the event known as the Holocaust. To do that, first we're going to look at anti-Semitism and see what it really was. And then we're going to look at the imprisonment of the Jewish people, and then eventually take a look at the Nazis' plan for genocide. So what really was anti-Semitism in Nazi Germany? Well, this picture here shows the German dictator Adolf Hitler. Now, Adolf Hitler was imprisoned for a short period of time before he came to power. And while he was in prison, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. And in it, he created the framework for German anti-Semitism, which means a discrimination towards the Jewish people. When I say Jewish people or reference the Jewish people through this lesson, I'm not strictly speaking about someone's religious beliefs. I'm also talking about a region in where these people are coming from. Now, he made anti-Semitism and discrimination an everyday part of German life, because once he became dictator, his Nazi party took power, and they were the only political party, and he tried to indoctrinate people into these Nazi beliefs. And he was telling the German people things that they wanted to hear, but then he was also planting seeds of these anti-Semitic ideas. Now, they didn't just extend solely towards the Jewish people. Other groups were included here as well. People of Gypsy descent, people who were homosexuals, people who were Jehovah's Witness, anyone who was seen as different than the ideal German person. It's interesting to point out, though, that Adolf Hitler's idea of a perfect German was an Aryan, someone with light skin, blonde hair, blue eyes. But take a look at Adolf Hitler himself. Does he have blonde hair and blue eyes? Adolf Hitler succeeded in increasing German nationalism in people, which meant that the people of Germany began to feel that Germans, or the ideal German, was actually part of a superior race and everyone else was inferior. Your lesson question for this lesson, once again, is, how did the Nazis commit the genocide known as the Holocaust? We're going to start by looking closer at anti-Semitism. We began to look at this in our warm-up. Remember that Adolf Hitler was an anti-Semitic, and he was planting the seeds of that discrimination in the German people. Why was he able to do this? Well, at this time period in history for the Germans, things were desperate in Germany. People were about as beaten down as they could be. Their economy was bad. Their unemployment was high. They had just finished out World War I, in which they got blamed for everything. The entire world was against Germany at this time. And all of a sudden, you had a very charismatic leader coming to power who was telling the people that he had a plan for things to get better. All the Germans wanted to hear was someone, anyone, to say, "It's not your fault, Germany." And Adolf Hitler was able to say that by turning the blame towards the Jewish people. Although most Germans were not racist or anti-Semitic, at this period in time, it was very easy to follow someone and adapt to their ideology of what they were thinking. So that's how so many Germans were able to blend into this type of thinking. Let's try to define anti-Semitism a little more in depth for you. Throughout history, the Jewish people have at times faced severe discrimination. They've been targeted because of their religion and also because of their culture. They were forced to live in ghettos in Germany, or segregated communities where all the Jewish people would be forced to live solely with one another, and they couldn't intermingle with the general population. They were prohibited from owning land or practicing certain occupations. There were some jobs that they were now prohibited from having. They faced widespread punishments, including deportations, physical abuse, and even murder. When Hitler came to power, anti-Semitism became an official government policy, which meant that becoming anti-Semitic towards the Jewish people was actually a law that was enforceable in Germany. There needed to be, by his standards, boycotts of Jewish businesses, removal of a Jewish person's citizenship status, because in Hitler's mind they weren't real Germans, discrimination on employment. There were restrictions on their education. No longer could Jewish children go to the same schools that German children were going to. And then also, there was the requirement that all Jewish people wear a yellow star, pictured just like this one. Now, Judaism was determined by their ancestry. Remember, not solely by their religion. As we move forward through this lesson, remember that I'm talking about a region, an ancestry, a culture, not just a religious belief. But here in this picture, you can see the sewn-on star that all Jewish people in Germany had to wear, identifying them as a Jewish person. German anti-Semitism hit one of its first heights with Kristallnacht. Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, occurred on November 9th and 10th in 1938. Nazi soldiers encouraged mobs to attack Jewish communities. Remember that all the Jewish people were being forced to live in close proximity to one another. Dozens of Jews were killed, and some 30,000 Jews were arrested and sent to concentration camps or German work camps. Thousands of synagogues and Jewish businesses were either vandalized or destroyed. You can see in this picture right here, this was a Jewish building, and you can see how the roof is blown out and the windows have been broken. Our lesson question is, how did the Nazis commit the genocide known as the Holocaust? We've started to define anti-Semitism and explain how some of those feelings were able to spread to the German people. I mentioned earlier concentration camps. Let's get a little more into that and take a look at Jewish imprisonment. After the war began, the Nazis began to take the Jewish people into custody. Some Jews were deported from Germany, others were sent to concentration camps or German work camps, and others still were confined to ghettos. In Warsaw, Poland, about 400,000 Jews were actually sentenced to live in a ghetto extending no more than 1 square mile in any given direction. Imagine that many people having to live in those tight quarters. You can see in this picture German soldiers rounding up people of Jewish descent and moving them either to concentration camps or into the ghettos. The Nazis created more than 1,000 ghettos in German-occupied Poland and also the Soviet Union. Ghettos housed Jews until they could be sent to concentration camps or those German work camps. The Jews were forced to perform hard labor, making war materials for the Nazis who were attempting to expand their lands. And eventually, all the ghettos were emptied as they moved people to these concentration camps. I want to focus very quickly on this photo right here. And I want you to pretend for a moment that you're a historian. This might be difficult considering the subject matter of this photograph. But here you can see the German soldiers rounding up the Jewish people from the ghetto and moving them to a concentration camp. Take a look at this little boy and historically imagine where he might be going, what he might be feeling, and what his outcome may have been. Concentration camps were where many of the Jews were sent. The Nazis set up their first concentration camps in 1933. The treatment at these camps was very brutal, and the conditions were often very inhumane. Many people were starved or dehydrated. Also, their living conditions weren't clean. It was a terrible place to be, and the labor was hard. People who could no longer work did not receive food, and many people died from starvation, along with other ways that they were able to pass away in these concentration camps. Our lesson question once again: how did the Nazis commit the genocide known as the Holocaust? We've defined anti-Semitism and explained how the German people came to feel so resentful towards the Jewish people. We talked about different forms of imprisonment, being rounded up, moved into ghettos, and eventually sent to concentration camps. Now, we're going to talk about the genocide itself. Once they started to feel pressure from Allied forces during World War II, Nazi officials met in 1942 and crafted what they called the final solution. They planned the genocide of Europe's Jewish population. A genocide is the systematic destruction of an entire race or group of people. Other people were also targeted, people like homosexuals, the Roma, Jehovah's Witnesses, the disabled, and also the mentally ill. These people were rounded up and they were sent to Nazi death camps. Jews were relocated to camps where they were forced into gas chambers and they were killed. What they did with the bodies is the Nazis would round up the bodies and they would take them to a crematorium. They would cremate them in these large fire kilns to hide the evidence of the murder. Now, one of the most famous Nazi death camps was a camp called Auschwitz. And in Auschwitz, nearly 8,000 people per day could be killed in Auschwitz. There were several of these death camps, and in fact, the Nazis realized that they had so many people in custody that they were creating new camps almost on a regular basis, mostly throughout Poland, trying to deal with this final solution before the Allies invaded. As Allied forces recaptured Nazi lands, they discovered these concentration or death camps. They liberated them. They freed the people who remained alive inside. Historians estimate that 6 million Jews were murdered under Nazi rule, and millions of other people were also killed. Those that were responsible were rounded up by the Allies, and they were tried for crimes against humanity. Now, when I say 6 million Jews, just to give you another point of reference, that's about 2/3 of all of the Jewish people throughout Europe. Now, to be tried for crimes against humanity, these people that were charged with these crimes were submitted to the Nuremberg trials. Nazi leaders were charged with war crimes and they were put on trial in Nuremberg, Germany. The highest ranking members were tried for crimes against humanity, things that were unthinkable, like these death camps or the systematic destruction of an entire human race. Now, Adolf Hitler obviously would have been at the top of that list to stand trial in the Nuremberg trials. However, he committed suicide. You can see on a timeline how long it took some of these ideas to take hold. In 1924, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, or My Struggle, while he was imprisoned. Then you can see in 1933 when he took power. In 1941, when the Jews in Germany were really discriminated upon and forced to wear a yellow star. And then from 1942 to 1945 when we experienced the Holocaust.